In the previous study, we began our look at the two deaths and two resurrections. We learned that our first death is the death typified by the first man, Adam, illustrating the rise of the self in our lives, leading to carnality and thus death. It should be noted that the actual proponent of carnality is the inordinate love of the self. The second death, correlating with Christ, the second man, and last Adam, speaks of the death of death, the death of the self that is responsible for bringing the first death into our being. As Romans 5:12 states, through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Adam, representing our entrance into this world as a natural person, shows that the one man is this natural person, or essence, if you will, what Paul also calls the natural body. Now that we have the first death and second death figured out, let's revisit the passages regarding the first resurrection. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Tradition has long advanced the idea that these passages describe an event that will take place sometime in the future. But if this is true, how do we explain the following? Then Peter answered and said to him, See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have? So Jesus said to them, Assuredly I say to you, that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Note the phrase, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory. When we bring this to Revelation 2:26 through 28, Revelation 3:21, and 1 Corinthians 15:25, we are presented with the idea that Christ is already seated on this throne. If this is true, then wouldn't it follow that his disciples are also on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel? Is this not pictured by the first fruits in Revelation chapters 7 and 14? And what about the 24 thrones that John sees around the throne of God in Revelation 4:4? Most importantly, do we not realize that judgment issues from a heavenly realm, not from an earthly one? Now, as I just noted, one problem in recognizing our present judgment is that we wish to bring this into the material realm and make it an actual occurrence, much like a big Hollywood movie where folks line up at a great white throne, have their sins read to them out of a book, and then receive their final decree. However, almost 2,000 years ago, Jesus said, Now is the judgment of this world. So, which is it? Was it then, or is it later? And if the world was judged then, has the Lord since changed his mind and we need another judgment? Haven't we already established that the Lord ascended to the right hand of the Father long ago and is still there at this present time? So wouldn't it make sense that his disciples, after their deaths, would ascend to their place with him at the right hand of the Father? Is it possible that this is what the first resurrection describes? Yes, I know. This is true. Then it sheds doubt on the idea of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Again, something tradition puts in the future. Many believe this is a literal 1,000 years. And what did Peter write? Do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. Perhaps Peter had the following in mind when he wrote this statement. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. I don't know about you, but I get the sense from Peter in this psalm that a day to the Lord is any length of time he wants it to be. So when we see something like the phrase reigned with Christ 1,000 years, it's not the 1,000 years we should emphasize, but rather the day. What day? The day of the Lord, of course. And by the way, in Genesis 1:5, God called the light day. So day itself is not so much about a certain length of time as it is about light. So it is that Paul said, we are all sons of light and sons of the day. In other words, when we walk in the light as he is in the light, then we are the day of the Lord. Did I just say that? I've said it many times. We keep trying to make all of these things future events. This one coming on this day, this one following on that day, and so on. Friend, these are not events, but ongoing spiritual processes issuing from the throne of grace, typified by the concept of sowing and reaping. What do we think Jesus meant by the word regeneration? Now, let me say this. Just because I suggest that these things are present realities does not mean that certain things don't remain in the future. Remember, these are processes, therefore they are working now and will continue to do so until God's purpose is fully accomplished. To further emphasize, another problem interpreting Revelation is that we keep trying to bring all of this back to this form-based world in which we presently abide. So, when we read such things as the meek inheriting the earth, we think it means we have to be on it for this to be true. But this assumption falls apart when we consider the following passages. And Jesus answered and said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, nor can they die any more, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. Sons of God, sons of the resurrection, equal to the angels, nor can they die anymore. I don't know that I perfectly understand everything Jesus says here, but even in a general sense, I get the impression that something far greater than this realm of flesh lies on the other side of this thing. And that being said, I don't see why anyone would want to give up that for this again. No doubt, one of the more confusing things about the first resurrection is the binding of the dragon and being cast into the bottomless pit, from which he is released after the 1,000 years are finished. How do we address this? By recognizing that Revelation is not only chronological in some respects, but also multifaceted. In other words, the same understandings are expressed differently in different areas. As an example, consider the following from the sounding of the sixth trumpet. Thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth, and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire, and smoke, and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. What might the presence of fire and brimstone in these passages allude to? Would it not be the lake of fire and brimstone seen in Revelation 14:10, 20:10, and 21:8? It would. So studying these passages and their meanings brings more understanding to the idea of the lake of fire. Might this same perspective be applied to other symbols and areas in Revelation? Yes, and the dragon in Revelation 20 is certainly one of these. That being said, we'll pick this up in the next study. Please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and a sincere thanks to all of you for being a part of Grain of Wheat Publishing. May the Lord bless you in your walk with Christ.